The cancel culture crowd at a major university strikes again. After an uproar from students in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas will no longer be teaching a course at George Washington University, something he has done since 2011. Now, regardless of what you think of Justice Thomas, the fact that he feels he can't safely and comfortably come back to the school to teach is a horrible reflection on where we are in this country. Last month, we told you about the student-launched petition to fire Thomas from his position as an adjunct professor and lecturer at the university's law school, where he taught constitutional law. The petition racked up over 11,500 signatures. It cited the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, as well as Thomas's concurring opinion that the court should reconsider rulings that legalize gay marriage and birth control. It also referred to Justice Thomas's wife, Ginny, who urged Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to continue the fight to overturn the 2020 presidential election after it was clear that the former president had lost and the legal remedies had been exhausted. Now, I can disagree with Justice Thomas on a lot of things, and at the same time, applaud the university, which bucked the trend, and in a surprising show of fortitude, backed initially Thomas's staying on campus, saying in part, quote, "Debate is an essential part of the university's academic and educational mission to train future leaders and prepare them to address the world's most urgent problems." Okay, makes sense. The idea of stopping a Supreme Court justice from teaching at a law school is beyond absurd. Nevertheless, the calls for Thomas to leave the university persisted. And last month, I invited the undergrad leading the petition to come in studio to debate it. I challenged him about stifling debate and made clear that I thought his petition was misguided. I also asked him this. Should it be any professor who thinks that Justice Thomas is spot on is out?
I think there's a difference specifically because Justice Thomas is paving the way to overturn those rights. How do you look somebody in the eye? How does a gay person look somebody in the eye that's paving the way for it to be illegal to be gay in their state and argue with them that their existence should not be criminal? Now, that student and those who joined him are getting exactly what they wanted. In an email, Thomas's teaching partner, Gregory Maggs, who's a federal judge, wrote to his students, quote, "Unfortunately, I'm writing with some sad news. Justice Thomas has informed me that he is unavailable to co-teach the seminar this fall. I know that is disappointing. I'm very sorry the seminar has not been canceled, but I will now be the sole instructor. For those of you still interested in taking the course, I assure you that we'll make the best of the new situation." Clearly, Justice Thomas knew he would not be able to peacefully teach a class. The silent majority who thrive on debate and hearing different opinions, though, are the real losers here.
I personally chose GW Law School because I was excited to have this opportunity to learn from a Supreme Court justice. And his class is one of the most popular courses to take.
Universities and law schools are places where debate is supposed to be a fundamental part of the learning experience. Particularly in law school, students need to be confronted with opinions they may not agree with, and even ones they find reprehensible. Justice Thomas effectively got canceled, and I think that that's bad for all of us. Joining me now to tell me what he thinks I'm getting wrong, Chris Hahn, an attorney and former aide to then Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and now the host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Thanks for coming back on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so what do you think I'm getting wrong here?
Well, Thomas canceled himself. Where he doesn't hear different opinions. It is the job of undergraduate. You and I were both undergraduate leaders when we were students back in our student days in the 90s. And we absolutely were expected to protest things that we didn't agree with. Now, when I went to law school, I didn't protest as much. I would have taken the class with Justice Thomas, and I would have argued with him about his wrong-headed beliefs in the Constitution, particularly the fact that he wants to overturn Obergefell, which gave marriage equality to Americans. So,
but again, you say he canceled himself, and technically that's true, right, in the sense that the university stood behind him, bucked the trend of these 11,500 students. But the reality is you can understand why, if you're Justice Thomas or any Supreme Court justice for that matter, in this environment, particularly at liberal institutions, and you have all these students who are there who are not just protesting, not just doing what you suggested, which is disagreeing with them, not just challenging them intellectually in the classroom. These people would have tried to ensure that Justice Thomas could not do his job. You've got to agree that would have been their goal.
I don't think that that's what their stated goal was.
I didn't ask you about their stated goal.
That would be up to the university and up to Clarence Thomas' security detail to make sure that that didn't happen. So, look, I think he could have taught this class. I thought he could have gone there. He may have had to answer some tough questions from both the students in the class and others as he walked into the building, particularly about what he knew about his wife's role in on January 6th. And did he vote the way he voted to keep Trump's documents sealed because he was worried
Let me ask you about that. So they cite his wife in their explanation for why they thought he shouldn't be teaching at the university anymore. Yep. Is that now the new standard, whereby someone, a group, wants to get someone kicked off campus, they can start talking about what the spouse does, et cetera, to get that person off?
Well, I think spouses should be off limits. But that said, I think Supreme Court justices who are ruling on matters that impact their wives should be recused from doing that. And if they aren't recused, they should be impeached by Congress and removed.
But that's a different issue.
Because he is conflicted.
That's a different issue. We're talking, I'm talking about teaching at a university. You want to criticize, you want to talk about what should happen. Okay, those are separate issues. What I'm talking about is a group of, and I can tell you that the student I had here in my studio was very smart and incredibly woke about everything. And you know, he was simply not willing to listen at all. I mean, you're telling me that what you would have done is you would have challenged him. You would have debated him. That's not what this guy was looking to do. He was looking to simply make sure he wasn't able to come to the campus. Well, and I can understand if you're Justice Thomas and you know you've got all these students who want to make sure that you can't be there, then at some point you say it's not worth it.
There are thousands of people in front of the Supreme Court, and he shows up to work every day. He somehow manages to do it. There are ways around it.
Maybe a little more security? Maybe a little more security there?
I'm sure the university would have made it possible for him to safely come and go from the classroom. I think that the man doesn't want to be around people who don't agree with him right now, and I can see why. And he's been cloistered for years. He was not canceled. Look, I don't agree with cancel culture, Dan. I'm the kind of guy who wants to go debate anywhere anybody will have me, and I'll talk to people from all sides, no matter what they believe.
So let me be clear. So you would have, before this decision, you would have disagreed with a student who was saying he should be off campus. You would have said,
no,
I think you're wrong.
I think it is the right of the students to protest. And if I had hair like that kid, I'd be very confident in my opinion.
But that's now, I'm not asking about the right to protest. I'm asking whether you would have taken the position, as I did, against him at the time when he was trying to get all these people to literally get the university to say he shouldn't be on campus anymore. Would you have joined me in saying you're wrong?
Yes, and when I was a student leader, when I was president of the student body at the University of Albany, I had a simple rule. All student groups were open to all students at all times with no exceptions. And that rule came into place. There were a lot of conflicts in the 90s in Albany. And it was it was an interesting time. But yes, I believe in diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, and people should be able to express their views, particularly if you are a person of power like Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court does not function the way the founders intended anymore. It's basically a super legislature for a variety of reasons, not all of it their own doing. But that said, he should be able to take the heat, show up, and teach his class.
Mr. Student Body President, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.